Ladies and gentlemen, so we've just been hit with a ton of information on the official forum. So we have this massive post, which kind of comes in two parts. So the first bit is talking about added difficulty, and it's a dev diary talking about all of the decisions and design that goes into making more difficult content, and kind of where the team is at in terms of their approach to making more difficult encounters in MCOC, because we have been at that verge. You know, Act 5 has almost been out for 100% for a year now. We are very, very close to the verge of kind of the next wave of big, challenging, difficult content within Marvel Contest of Champions. And some of that content, man, gets teased at the bottom of it. So we are going to have Map 7 coming very shortly to Alliance Quest. We're also going to have back issues, which we briefly talked about in the patch notes, but these are going to be permanent. So permanent story, hard mode content of kind of previous events brought back, are kind of interlinked into big events in the contest, big events in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, that kind of, you know, for the most part, tie hand in hand. So the first one is going to be the Ultron one, and this confirms that it's going to be permanent content and have a variant difficulty, also a classic difficulty as well. So there's going to be a classic one, which I assume people can breeze through. It's a permanent piece of content where people can get, you know, progressing players can get a nice stack of rewards. Hopefully, we don't know exactly what they are yet, but the variant difficulty seems to be a serious challenge, is, you know, what they're boasting here. So that's really, really good. I think one of the things that I absolutely love talking about from the perspective of, like, new players is how much static content now there is in Marvel Contest of Champions. You know, I've done it in videos like the Progression Path 2018, but I think that's one of the things that's quite appealing when picking up Marvel Contest of Champions, is that, you start playing the game, you're like, oh, this is pretty cool, the combat's, like, pretty interesting, and then you're like, whoa, there's all of these characters, and then you kind of look up all of the stuff that there is and how to progress through the game, and you're like, there's so much stuff to do. So adding more static content just on top of that, I'm a big fan of, and makes it even, you know, quicker to gear up and get, you know, better characters, better rosters for the skilled players there, and just more rewards in general. So I'm very excited to see if the back issues are something fairly exciting there. But for the blubbery whales and endgame players, man, we've got Map 7 and also Act 6 coming. So just to briefly talk on Act 6, it's set to release in 2019. The general information is it is going to be a big step up from Act 5. So the Act 4 to Act 5 jump is, you know, pretty substantial, pretty huge, about a 3 to 4 times increase in terms of kind of the health pools and attack pools, generally speaking. So I'm expecting stuff in Act 6 to be pretty damn chunky, anywhere between about 250,000 and 400,000 health. Maybe is what to expect. Maybe it's going to be a little bit lower than that, but I assume if they're you know, pegging this to be super difficult content, you know, we're going to see exactly what kind of stuff we may have in store. And I think for Act 5 in general, there's a lot of, like, Act 5 stuff that I like. Obviously, there are some crap fights in Act 5, man. I think, like, Act 5.1 was absolutely perfect, great introduction. 5.2, it's a little bit hit and miss. There were definitely some very fun and interactive fights, mainly the Collector, but also early on, certain ones like, you know, Magic on the Bane and Masochism for that time, that were really fun for a lot of people to deal with, but nothing that's really too bad in the current state. 5.3, a bit of a slog, but I think they hit the nail on the head in 5.4, man. That is a great chapter to explore. It kind of really tests you in a lot of areas, and the rewards are well worth it, and I kind of think that's one of the definitely big things when it comes to Act 6, is kind of making that good, that fun, that interactive challenge, but also at the same time making it rewarding, man. That's the big one as well. You want to make sure that once you've climbed Mount Everest, once you've pushed yourself past your limit of play, that you are rewarded very nicely from it. So personally, I'm very excited for Act 6. I think it's going to be a really cool time. Again, there's not too much information on it, but I am really looking forward to kind of some big new difficult content, because again, it has been quite a long time, man, since we've had a kind of big endgame static challenge. And personally, I do significantly prefer big challenges to be released in terms of solo content instead of Alliance Quest 1. And we'll talk about now the introduction of Map 7. So let's have a bit of a read of some of the wonderful Kabam messaging here. So we know that many of you have speculated about in the past. We've spent a lot of time making Alliance Quest more accessible for more alliances, and also continue to educate new summoners on this. One thing that we have left for some time is making a new map for our advanced summoners. However, Map 7 is that map. Top alliances are not finding Map 6 difficult anymore. The buffs are old and now easily countered, and very little has changed regarding the challenge of Map 6. While that is set to change soon, it will not shift the general structure of the map. Map 7 allows us to introduce a new structure that challenges the best of the best, as opposed to creating a dramatic shift in existing content. This allows us to reintroduce what we refer to internally as a passing lane. So this creates a way for summoners who might not have the same prestige as another alliance to earn more points through commitment and skill, and also buying a shit ton of health potions and revives by playing a more difficult map. This is initially what Map 6 was when we first introduced it, but it since has been moved away from that role as summoners continue to grow. If we just updated Map 6, we would have to create a huge jump in difficulty from Map 5 to Map 6, which we don't feel would offer you the best experience. With Map 7, our focus is all on your roster. We want to create a rotating challenge that truly feels unique every week and is tailored more specifically to the large amount of utility our advanced summoners have at their disposal with their rosters. We are designing Map 7 to be a new passing lane and to challenge your ability to coordinate with your alliance, apply your knowledge of the role-playing game elements of the game, use your roster depth, utilize your fighting skills. Map 7 should not be more time-consuming, but it will have less reserve paths and will require everyone in your battle group to bring their A game. We're not aiming to have individuals commit to logging in more often than Map 6 or introducing many more fights for each summoner. The time you spend on Map 7 will be much more intense. So again, just in terms of the time commitment, they're looking to keep it fairly similar. I'm imagining, you know, a very similar structure to Map 6, but significantly harder. And I think my general thing for Alliance Quest is, like, you know, it's right in regards to top alliances and not finding Map 6 difficult anymore when you have your top champions out of Alliance War. It's pretty straightforward, but at the moment, Alliance War is all to play for, and 50% of the time, you know, maybe like 3 out of 5, you know, Alliance Quest runs every single week, you're fighting an Alliance War, and your top characters are there. And at least for myself, I find myself often taking like 5-star characters that rank 3 into Map 6 at the moment. So taking 5-star characters that's rank 3 into Map 7 does sound a little boring, a little bit concerning, because, you know, I think it's going to be a good challenge for the top of your roster, but kind of the main point is that the majority of the time, a lot of people have their top champions invested in Alliance War, and they will probably continue to have to do that. You know, it's a little bit too early to judge exactly how Map 7's going to be. I like the idea of a new challenging map. I like the idea of even more Alliance Quest rewards, because I think the rewards, you know, especially after the last season revamp, are some of the best they've ever been for Alliance Quest. Even if you're running just a lot of Map 5, a lot of Map 6, they've definitely gone up a significant amount in the last couple of months. But, yeah, I'd love to see, you know, the ability to always be able to bring in whatever characters you want, especially if they're going to be rotating buffs and challenges, because, you know, it's a pain in the ass to organize, like, Alliance War defense at the moment, because you still have to place for diversity and all of that stuff, so kind of coordinating that around, like, a shifting Map 7 as well, at a time where, you know, top alliances, man, have their highest turnover ever in players, and putting more stress on kind of that end of the game, I just don't think is maybe the most clever idea overall for kind of the alliance structure currently in Marvel Contest of Champions. So I don't know. Again, we don't have like all of the information on Map 7 at the moment, and we haven't seen it in the game. It just seems like Again, top alliances and players right at the whaley end are getting pushed even more for stuff that they have to do kind of on a daily basis. And I don't think that's a good way to push people, because it kind of drives them, if they're forced to play and forced to, you know, keep up in that level, because it can be incredibly cycling when playing at the top. Just putting more stress on them. I don't know. I just don't think it's the absolute best idea out there. But, you know, I'm gonna save my reservations to see exactly how fun and interactive map 7 turns out to be. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, let's have a bit of a chat about, you know, the general policy on kind of increasing difficulty within Marvel Contest of Champions. And I'm gonna you know, briefly kind of skim over, you know, the kind of general, because there's a lot of stuff to this, and I strongly recommend reading it in a lot of detail if you want to find out stuff like why they add more difficult content and what they mean by more difficult content. So there is a lot of stuff there, but this is essentially their considerations and goals for building difficult content. So the first one is create a fun and challenging experience. One of our highest priorities when designing quest content is that we create something that you will enjoy. Difficulty and fun go hand in hand, but striking the right balance is important, and not always an easy task. An opponent with 1000% attack is a lot scarier and harder than one with plus 50% attack, but isn't more interesting. It's not fun to walk into a fight and immediately lose your entire roster to a challenge with no counters. Now, just reading this line specifically, and this is kind of like quoted a couple of times, like, I've got to say, man, I entirely agree with this sentiment at all, but at the same time, man, I think 2 fights that have been a bit overly punishing when it comes to the top epic and uncollected difficulty. I think uncollected Emma Frost, man, she started off with 300%, you know, additional attack. It was a lot of damage, man. You know, you taking a crazy amount of block damage at the start of that fight, and she got, you know, a bit of a difficult fight, man, a bit of a challenge to get used to there. So that's definitely an example of where that's maybe a little bit hypocritical. But the second example I would like to point out is Aegon this month as well. You know, once you're up, if you are not prepared for the first fight, if you do not one-shot Aegon, if you make some mistakes, man, he's going to get that block penetration. You're going to die on, like, any crit parry, and Aegon, as the fight progresses, his combo goes up rapidly with that node buff as well. He gets, like, 300% additional attack, plus maybe a little bit more as well. So, again, I completely agree with this. Going into a fight and having an opponent that has, like, a ridiculously amount of stacked attack isn't a fun experience. But, you know, I'm glad that's been acknowledged, but if we could see that maybe reflected a little bit more in terms of the content design, because I do believe that Aegon and Emma Frost, while they're manageable fights for people who can look up the video guides and kind of, you know, take the time to break down the abilities, they are not fun fights for the average person that will walk in, and maybe a little bit overtuned for, comparatively speaking, in terms of all the other, like, epic content and bosses there, or uncollected content. So yeah, 2 fights I think arguably just a little bit overtuned there, and again, a lot of attack just isn't the most fun mechanic there. So there are other ways that we try to make difficulty more enjoyable. So placing local nodes that shake up your team or playstyle, encouraging you to try different champions or experience some combat variety, creating epic battles like when you go up against a final boss in a new story quest. Now, I think on the last one, man, they did a really good job on that with Infinity Thanos. I thought that was a really, really good fight for kind of the big Infinity War event. But, you know, like, I think Thanos, Kang, they're pretty basic bosses now. Maestro, like, he's good. I think, like, they're, you know, Kang, Thanos, and Maestro, in terms of, like, progressing through the story, they're all at quite a good level of difficulty for where, like, summoners are at that point, and they can feel like quite the triumph, man. The Collector is still a fun and interactive fiesta, but it feels good to just get that fight out of the way. And there are, you know, increasingly more champions that are substantially more effective at taking him down without having to spend as many revives as you did before. So we're always trying to make conscious choices on how summoners can enjoy the content that we create, even if that challenge is very tough and not immediately surmountable. So create the appropriate difficulty. It takes hard work, time and effort and commitment to become a super powerful summoner, and when content is created targeted in this group, not just anyone should be able to take on that challenge. While the uncollected title requirement can be a good skill check for us, we always want the content to feel like it's something that's worth your time. So add variety to champion choices. Some champions are exceptional at clearing quest content. We want those champions to feel rewarding to rank and level up, and we want to continue to provide quest content where you can see those champions' strengths. However, if every quest could be completed by the same champions in the same way every time, the game would get pretty boring, which is something, you know, I pretty much agree with there. With this in mind, we're making our new quest content, especially for you advanced summoners. We try to encourage using other champions and not always the A-team. This can be using unique local nodes that require you to keep up your combo count, although I don't really like the what is it, like, proving one, man, you know, get 15 hits, all the champion is immune. That one's like a little bit annoying, just in my opinion there. I'm just not the biggest fan of that one personally. And then we've got testing parrying skills, nodes that benefit a champion of a certain type. So those are the ones that I imagine are like plus 125% attack in this one for mutants and stuff like that. So this is how we've been approaching providing more challenge by using mechanics that encourage skilled players or encourage a deeper understanding of the RPG elements of the game and not just cranking up the numbers. Opponents with insane attack values become boring because every fight they're involved in is binary. Either you play perfectly or win, or you make single mistake and you lose. We want to give you more variety and a much more interesting fight than that. And again, this is the perfect quote that completely counters the design of Aegon and also Emma Frost when it comes to the top difficulty. Again, both very binary fights, both very, you make one mistake and you lose. So yeah, I just wanted to, you know, point out that a bit of a hypocritical statement there in comparison to some of the designs. I'm just saying, you know, that's exactly what we had in the last few months for a couple of fights there. So yeah, I'm very excited for variant difficulty, man. It seems really, really interesting. It's going to be a serious challenge. So they're bringing back kind of old events that they had, but kind of revamping them to be super hard. But there was also, again, going to be the classic mode there. However, there's also going to be champion requirements on this, and you need a varied roster to take them on. So each chapter in variant difficulty will require that you only bring champions for 2 specific classes. They are built around understanding the strengths and weaknesses of that class, and more specifically, the abilities available to each champion within that class. Your raw combat skills will undoubtedly be tested. We're also leaning on your knowledge of champion abilities, immunities, resistance, and counters, or maybe the ability just to look up a guide on YouTube. So I am interested to see some of the back issue content, exactly how that works and shapes up, and what kind of difficulty it's going to be at, and what kind of rewards it's at. And I think the announcement for all of this stuff in a little bit more detail is going to be available later this evening. But overall, you know, I'm excited for the future of Marvel Contest of Champions. I think, you know, I've been relatively positive recently, just because overall, you know, Kabam still do make their mistakes. They still do mess up, but I feel like stuff has been significantly more fun and interactive, and they've been a lot of counters and a lot of new and interesting champions going into this ever-evolving meta that is kind of spicing up the game a little bit more and giving it a lot more new life. Like, in terms of a lot of the tier list iterations, I feel like there has never been a time where I've just been chucking in so many like god tier or high demigod tier champions, just because a lot of the new champions are so well designed. And obviously, you know, not everybody's going to have the new champions at the start, but 3.5 months after that they become available in the crystals, and then 6 months later you have them in the arena. And at the moment we're just seeing a flood of like god tier, high demigod tier champions, all the really good characters that we released earlier this year just hitting the crystals, and like crystal shard acquisition rates just going up and up and up in terms of 4-star champions. 5-star champions are dropping like candy. 6 stars, they're still pretty stingy on the 6-star ones, but you know, 6-star champions are incredibly powerful when you do get them. So you know, providing you get a good one, of course, that's obviously what you're looking for there. So yeah, I don't know, overall, like, I'm relatively optimistic about the future of Marvel Contest of Champions, but it's really hard to judge this content and how difficult it's going to be and how fun and interactive till we can actually play it, actually see how feasible it is. But I'm going to go into it at the moment with an open mind, because I think they've done a fairly decent job on the majority of content that they've added this year in comparison to, you know, big Clown Fiestas that we've seen previously. I feel like the Clown Fiesta element in terms of like actual content, actual design has been toned down a little bit, but obviously, I don't know, man, you know, it's still Marvel Contest of Champions, and still stuff can be a little bit fun at certain points, especially if you do not have specific characters. But I don't know, man, there are a lot of ways to view the game at the moment, and there's such a variance in terms of like champion collections and skill that it's such a huge gap from a brand new player to somebody playing in like MMX, like tier 1 bracket Alliance War. Like, it's huge, man, the skill, the champions that you have available. But overall, I'm excited for the future, man. I think there's going to be some really cool stuff coming next year in Marvel Contest of Champions, and for the meantime, I will remain optimistic because I've enjoyed a lot of the stuff recently. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, enough rambling from me. What do you think? Let me know in the comments section below. But aside from that, thank you very much for watching. If you want to check out the dev diary, a link to it will be in the description of this video. But take care, and I hope that you have an absolutely fantastic day.